Well, the project was conceived in 2015, and this was in response to the Central Mediterranean situation at the time. There was the refugee crisis. We had the influx of refugees from the Middle East. Also had influx from refugees from sub-Saharan Africa, and at the time, Eritrean and Somali refugees and asylum seekers made up the highest number of persons crossing the Mediterranean. So at the time, based on a study that was conducted, it was evident that there was not enough information about the dangers of using smugglers to move irregularly. And this is where telling the real story came in as part of UNHCR's response in terms of provision of information so that people can be able to make informed decisions. So the project started in 2015, addressing the Somali and Eritrean refugees from the East Horn of Africa, and started initially just by providing them information through testimonies of others who had made similar journeys to Europe, of the difficulties they endured, the dangers that they encountered, what it is that they witnessed, and also the narratives that smugglers told them before they left that might have pushed them to leave.
Thank you very much for that, Christa. This is part of the background because we're trying to actually lay the background for the story. And of course, we are going to go much deeper in some of the legs and hands of this project because it's a big one. You'll be following it for a long time. And now, from your experience listening to different people, different Africans, of course, because we are concentrating on this demography. Why would you say people leave? Like, what is the reason that these Africans are leaving the continent to Europe?
People leave for such diverse reasons. And one thing that I would like to just underline is that, often when people see the images of Africans in Libya or on the Central Mediterranean having rescued, there's this almost boxing them. But people never think that the people do have their own really individual reason for moving that way. Some are fleeing persecution and human rights violations. Others are seeking a better education or employment opportunities, including to provide support to their family members in their home countries. While some are also do not feel that they have the protection services in the countries of asylum might not be sufficient, so they would like to move onward. Some feel that some processes such as refugee status determination, family reunification, resettlement is either not available or it's too lengthy, and then they choose to move onwards. And for this insufficient livelihood and resilience support either in their home countries or in their countries of asylum, and just limited access to these durable solutions that I've mentioned, such as resettlement and family reunification, that makes them move forward. So the reasons why people move are really diverse. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it's really diverse. I completely agree with you. Okay, so this project set up by the United Nations was to sort of look into the situation like you already described, no? Which is not even a very simple situation as it were, people leaving Africa to Europe, because it's not even a simple decision for somebody to just wake up one day and say, well, I'm going to become an immigrant in another man's country. That is not a decision to make easily. This is something that people don't easily understand because they think that maybe somebody just wants to abandon his home country, his culture, his people, his friends and loved ones, and become a refugee in another man's country. It is not like that. There are a lot of things involved. All right, now coming back to the project, telling the real story. Tell me, what was the main objective for which this project was set up?
Well, Like you've said, making the decision to leave is not an easy decision. It's not a decision overnight. There's so many factors that people have to make. For many refugees and asylum seekers that we have spoken to, there is not a full understanding of the full extent of risks and suffering that lie ahead of them when they decide to leave, when they make that decision. They might be aware of the possibilities of finding themselves in trafficked situations. They might be aware of the possibilities that they might run out of food, there'll be hunger, there's a possibility of death. But there is still, what has been very clear from those who have made it to Europe is that even though they thought they knew what the possible dangers were, but it was only until they were in that position they realized that they might have underestimated the dangers. And also the diaspora continue to play a critical role in influencing people in mixed flows, intentionally and unintentionally, encouraging people to take this journey by, incentivizing the journey, giving them money for it. And in some cases, the diaspora, posting photos that might not be a true representation of their lives in Europe, making it look like they're wealthy and rich, saying that, this is where there's all the wealth. So there's this unintentional and intentional ways in which people are encouraging people to take this journey. So the objective of the project is to provide information on the dangers of movement, but additionally provide information on regular pathways, complementary pathways, legal ways of moving, and also highlight protection and assistance services that are available in countries of asylum and how refugees and asylum seekers can be able to access them. And also, of course, in addition to debunking the false narratives from smugglers and traffickers. So in many words, that is the objective of telling the real story.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that. Now, this project, what does it cover? Like, is it specific on certain topic? Like, for example, I know there are some projects here in Italy that are specific on women that have been trafficked from Africa to Europe to become prostitute, sex worker, or things like that. And there are other ones that might be geared towards other primary objective. So I'm trying to understand here, if telling the real story is specific on certain category of immigrant or refugee, or is it any type of immigrant or any type of refugee, specifically maybe a refugee or any type of immigrant or any category of refugees?
Well, the project itself is specific on the communities that we engage with. So I've mentioned that we engage with Somali and the Eritreans, and we have also engaged with the Nigerians. The stories that we have cover the whole demographic, whether the person is a refugee or asylum seeker or a migrant. And also how we present information. We do have teams in the countries of asylum as well as countries of origin who work directly with the populations of concern, but we also share information on our social media pages, which do very well. They reach an average of 2 million every month, 2.5 million people every month in those countries. And also we do work very closely with the media. So, and the reason why we have these multiple channels is first, people are more aware of information, or information becomes more memorable when you listen to it multiple times and from multiple channels. And then also multiple channels allows us to reach wider populations rather than the people who will be meeting face to face in the refugee camps. So wider populations, by this I mean people who possibly might not be seeking asylum along the route, but would be able to be aware of the services available and possibly maybe opt to seek asylum rather than move onwards. So we do communicate to everybody. We don't have a set, you could say, demographic. Of course, like I've said, we are engaging, as UNHCR, engaging mainly with refugees and asylum seekers, but also the wider population, because the issue of migration is an issue that affects the wider population and not just refugees and migrants. And the wider population does play a role as well in the movement of persons.
All right, thank you, Christa. Thank you very much for that. Now, I'm trying to understand something. This information that you gather, this interview and the story that you gather from the people, what do you do with it? Do you make it available for everybody to have access to, or is it maybe for a research purpose? So you analyze, then you produce a report at the end of the day. So, I mean, what happened to this information that you gather?
So the testimonies that we gather are really the cornerstone of the project. We gather testimonies, and these testimonies highlight the difficulties, like I mentioned before, the misinformation that they received, and so on. And these testimonies play a central role in our awareness raising and outreach work, whereby we share them with the refugees and asylum seekers, as well as the wider population, and conversations around, and they're used to trigger conversation and dialogue on the issue of irregular onward movement. So, for instance, the trafficking of women, for instance, from Nigeria, the conversation from the testimonies that we have gathered we see that the madams play a very significant role when it comes to the trafficking of women from Nigeria. By targeting women who are already vulnerable, by targeting women who have already been exposed to gender-based violence and already in a vulnerable place. So they're easy targets for such persons. So we use these testimonies in our discussions. We after showing the testimonies, we have a discussion, and from that discussion, we hope that then persons could be able to judge from the story, and judge the information that they have, and hopefully they'd be able to plan their next steps.
All right. Now, looking at the project itself by the description, telling the real story, of course, it sounds to me very interesting, in that even for somebody looking at just the title, it's really very important for somebody, of course, who want to look at the story of immigration. Because of course there are a lot of statistics out there, there are a lot of data out there, but sometimes this data do not have faces, they do not have face in them. In that people don't really know the people behind the story. They usually hear stories that are too far away. So, but looking at telling the real story by putting it really in the middle, it makes it even more interesting that somehow we are going to be looking at the real story of the people. Now, from what these people tell you, what would you say is the thing that we really need to pay attention to in terms of this irregular migration? Because I want to believe that what is being discouraged here is not immigration or migration as it were, but the irregular migration, which of course is for a reason, because we're having a lot of cost, human cost particularly. Of course, I'm going to ask you something about the human cost at the part of the interview. But now what I'm asking is, looking at the story that you are hearing from the people, how can we use this one as a way of sensitizing the people even more? Okay, let's put it like that.
Well, I think it's important to underline that telling the real story is not aimed to discourage people from moving, because if you're in need of international protection, you should be able to move. And quite frankly, as a refugee or asylum seeker, you might not have the opportunity to travel regularly from your country to another country to seek asylum, especially maybe if you're running away from political persecution. Your government might stop you from leaving, and that is why majority of refugees move irregularly. What the project is about, it's irregular onward movement. Once you're at a country of asylum, and then you do choose to use the services of smugglers and traffickers to move onward, then we need to tell you of what danger that puts you in. Because what we have had from our testimonies is there are a lot of promises in the beginning from the smuggler or the agent about safety, about their success rates, about the conditions. There is a lot of misinformation that people are provided in the beginning, and there is and also just not realizing at what point do you end up in the hands of a trafficker, and in the trafficker's hand is when you no longer have the free will to make a decision about your movement. That is when we hear of all the trafficking situations, all the difficulties, the detention of persons by traffickers in Libya who are sold and resold, and we hear of the tremendous amounts of monies that the traffickers demand. So really the project is about, once you're in a country of asylum or country of transit, you should be aware of what dangers there are for you if you use a smuggler to move onwards, and what options there are for you also in this country. So our teams on the ground work very hard to provide information on services available for refugees, opportunities that are available for refugees. Right now, we are busy promoting scholarship opportunities for refugees in Ethiopia, for instance, that have been provided by Italy. Our team in Ethiopia has been having sessions with refugee graduate students to help them apply for these scholarships, because they're made available for refugees. So these are some of the areas that we work with.
Thank you very much for that clarification, Christa. That is really very important. Now, I'm sort of wondering, can we say that your project, at a point, sort of go deeper into the network of the people that are taking advantage of maybe the refugee, because this is one of the arguments that is coming up often and again. Sometimes even the process of, because when laws are made, there are usually some exemption in that sometimes because it becomes a machine, or that sometimes people know how the machine works, then they take advantage of it. For you as a project, try to look at the story of this immigrant, this refugee. You interview them, you talk to them. Do you have the possibility of intervening in a way that the people that are sort of networking and taking advantage of them, trafficking them, taking advantage of the possibility of becoming refugees, and therefore using that one as a way of bringing people in and later making them to pay them money? I mean, do you have a way of maybe punishing those people, stopping them, or do you have any way of intervening in those areas, or do your project end with the narration of the immigrant themselves?
Well, first, UNHCR is not a law enforcement agency, because that would not be the function of the organization, and neither is it for the project. What has happened is that, because one main area of the project is to promote this intra-community dialogue and to provide a platform in which the community can discuss these issues, and when when there have been smugglers that have identified and so on, they are referred to the right agency or organization to report and investigate. But that is not the project's mandate, I'm afraid. Otherwise, we would be doing someone else's job.
All right. That's fair enough. That's fair enough. Thank you for that clarification also. Now, I'm trying to get something clear in that when you look at the story of immigration, particularly that is happening through the Mediterranean, the African that are coming to Europe, the refugee, their story in the Sahara Desert and in Libya and up to Italy is something that is really very costly, as it were, now, because first of all, we are looking at very young people who are leaving the continent, and not that all of them are arriving, a lot of them are dying on the way, which make it a very huge cost to the African continent, and of course to this family, because we are not just talking of numbers, we are talking of human beings. So, since that you are talking to these people, you are sort of documenting also their story. I don't know what you want to share with us in terms of the human cost of this irregular migration.
I mean, the human cost is huge. When you lose, I think a lot of times we forget that when we hear that X number of people have died in the Mediterranean, say 10 people have died in the Mediterranean, we forgot that there are 10 families that have lost someone. There is that cost, and you cannot imagine families who might never know, and even if they do know, would never see the body. Then there is, of course, the financial cost. This movement, thousands and thousands of dollars. Families have been forced to sell property to pay traffickers. Families have been forced to have found themselves in abject poverty because they need to pay a trafficker ransom. And for these reasons also, for those who do make it to Europe, they feel hugely indebted because your family has given everything. They feel hugely indebted to pay back. And even when their life does not turn out to be how it was, they cannot go back out of guilt, out of stigma, out of feeling indebted. And other than the physical cost of people dying, there's a physical cost to the person who was moved, because majority will have endured some sort of suffering. The women, majority of them have been raped. The men have been beaten, they have been tortured. Everybody has been beaten and tortured. And then, so there is that physical cost. And then there is also psychological cost, because everything that they have gone through in the hands of these traffickers is not something that you will be able to erase from your memory in even a few years. And some people might suffer a lifetime with these situations. And we have had cases where some people, after getting to Europe, have committed suicide because they cannot deal with what it is that they experienced when they moved. So there is the financial cost, there is a psychological cost, there is the human cost, the people who do die. There's the cost to the families who also suffer psychologically, financially, and those who are never going to be able to see the bodies of their loved ones, those who maybe their loved ones were the breadwinner of their homes, and they're now left in absolute abject poverty because this person might have died on the journey. And then there is, of course, also the costs on the women who have been raped, who might have bore children, and further on trafficked in Europe, and found themselves in some sort of modern day slavery where they're forced to work for an amount of money that is exponential, that they were not made aware of, an amount of money that they will need to pay back for most of their life. So there is a loss. There's a loss of life. There's a loss of livelihood. There's a psychological loss. There's a financial loss. There's a loss of time. People who have moved, the hope of either getting education and so on, finding themselves in trafficked situation, in Libya, there are people who have been moved from one trafficker to another for years, for 3-4 years. So there's time lost as well. So the cost is it's huge. It's difficult to even put a worth to it, because it is massive for both the person who's moving and their family at home.
Thank you for that. Yes, of course, we are telling the story, and we need to continue to tell the story, even though sometimes it's actually heartbroken. It's heartbroken. It serves also the people who are merely looking at numbers to understand that here we are talking of human beings. We are talking of people who have become victims of circumstances. So it is important that we continue to tell the story. All right. I'm trying to look at one of the costs, the psychological aspect of it, because okay, if somebody has died, there is nothing you can do about that, and that has become the collateral loss at the point, no? But for the people who have arrived and they have suffered some psychological damages, which of course is always the case, because if you have passed through Libya with all those torture there, it's natural that you are going to have some kind of that you are going to have some kind of reverberation in your life, sometimes for your entire life. So with this UN project that you guys are running, is there a way that you intervene in the life of these people from the point of view of psychology to sort of help them to regain themselves? Or just like I was saying before, no, in relation to the legal aspect, maybe when you now identify the network, what do you do? Of course, you clarify that does not include the project, because that would mean policing. So the UN doesn't have that one as one of the mandates. But what about the intervention from a psychological point of view to some of these people that are the victim and now need help?
As you're probably aware, Obehi, in Europe, majority of the countries, I can give an example here in Sweden. We have the Swedish Migration Agency that is responsible for all asylum cases. So therefore, each individual's case is handled by this agency, and they are responsible for the referral mechanisms to offer psychosocial support. So therefore, this is not an area that the project can be able to engage in, because each country has a system in place to provide support. However, we have in our discussion, this is where our diaspora engagement is very important, because we hold conversations, dialogues with the diaspora on this issue of irregular movement, mainly to glean into new trends, to be able, so that the diaspora can also be able to provide us information on what more we could do, on how we could tailor the project, and so on and so forth. However, in these platforms as well, the diaspora has the opportunity to also discuss issues that are affecting either new arrival or the community at large. So one area that has come up repeatedly, yes, is the psychological impact and the psychological issues that new arrivals do face. So through these networks and these platforms that we have formed with the diaspora, we're able to get the diaspora to come up with collective solutions, to be able to support their compatriots who have traveled to Europe. So I could give you one good example, is that we had a diaspora meeting in Germany. This was in Frankfurt, and psychosocial support was an issue that came up in this meeting. And what was concluded was that the diaspora would every month go to the reception centers, or the centers that host refugees within the area of in that area, and they would get the refugees out and engage them in sports or some sort of activity, so that they can feel that they're part of a wider community and that they're not by themselves. And then additionally, they have stepped up to support the local authorities with translation, and also be able to, because maybe a Western doctor might miss some nuances from someone when they're speaking to them. A psychologist might not be able to catch some nuances. One example is, I had a case where a doctor somewhere had made a comment about a refugee, because when he asked this refugee or asylum seeker about what they encountered, and they started to laugh, and laughing, not laughing haha, but just just laughing, and but this is a nuance. This is a cultural way of way expressing yourself, expressing that what you endured is hard to talk about. So you might laugh at that question, but it was misinterpreted that this person was not serious. So being able to engage the diaspora, to be able to play with a translation, be able to better explain these nuances, so that people can, so that those asylum seekers can be better understood. And also, the diaspora also plays a very important role in terms of encouraging their compatriots to seek psychological help, because in some countries, in some cultures, psychological help is frowned upon. It's seen as a disability. Some cultures say that if you're looking for psychological help, you must be mad. But this is where the diaspora encourages the person that this is a service that you need for the betterment of your well-being.
Thank you very much for that, Christa. Thank you so much. It's an important point. I see there are a lot of important points in what you just said, no? And first, you have to do with the psychology, even the whole question of psychology is something that we need to really be looked into, because this argument, I've really been looking at it for a very long time, in that it might be that the term psychology, the word itself, might be new to a lot of people, even in Africa, but the concept is not new at all. I'll give you an instance. In my place, say maybe, for example, you slept and you had a dream, and the dream was frightening to you. You do not understand what it means. There is a place you go. You go to see the diviner, for example, the soothsayer. Okay, let's say how the Europeans have made us to see the witch doctor, but then there's nothing witchery about it. You just go to meet somebody who have a kind of, who know what you do not know. And this person is able to talk to you, to wash you away from that negative influence that you might have had in the night. Because sometimes life is really very complex. It's not something very simple as it might appear to be. So psychology is deeply rooted in our culture. It's just that we haven't understood it the way that the West want us to understand it, and therefore we create the whole confusion around it. Now, coming back to the one that you were talking about, which had to do with the understanding, with the misconception, actually, it's the same thing that we'll be facing here also in Italy. Because I do translation. Sometimes I go to the tribunal to translate for people. So I've really gotten this story very close to me, in that apart from researching, apart from documenting the story, I also have been there face to face with the judges and have to translate. And one of the things that I've noticed is that there are too many negations, too many negative, too many refusals to accept the story that the people are telling, so they are not accepted. Therefore, the cases need to be appealed. Right now, in this phase of the project, I'm talking to a lot of lawyers that are following up the cases. So one of the questions I'm trying to ask them is, why are there too many negative results from this story? And one of the things that we also try to get is that it's not that the story doesn't really make sense. It's just like you are saying, we need to understand it from a cultural point of view. Because if this first commission that was set up here expect that this person who have never been to Europe before tell the story according to the European concept of storytelling, they were getting the whole thing wrong. I'm not saying that they don't know their job, but the point is that you really need to know the culture of the person you are having in front of you, or at least invite somebody that knows that culture to do the intermediary, to do the interpretation. Because you can't tell me that somebody that have passed through that torture in Libya, in the Mediterranean Sea, how can you just give negatives to that person? It's hard. It's heartening. In fact, it's really hard as a story. So I think there has to be a kind of interpretation somehow. We need to understand the story because sometimes this person that you are asking a question, you need to open the psychology have a way of opening your door so that you can then flow. I don't think that these guys in this first commission go to that length. A woman that have been violated, that have been abused, you don't just go there and say, tell me your story, and she just open up to you. Come on, human beings don't tell stories like that. She might not tell you. It's not because she's wicked or she doesn't need the paper. It's because you need to do more work to get to the point where she opened up her heart and begin to tell you those deep things. Those are private things. You need to work to get there.
And I could just add, what you're saying is very true, Obehi, because when we gather these stories, they seem a lot and we seem to be, we are very successful at it. But there is a lot of trust building that goes into the gathering these stories. We don't just our camera crew and tell us your story. No. We have discussions months before. We have, before even the story is gathered, we meet the person. We talk with them. We meet them at their home. We have dinner with them. We have lunch. There needs to be trust that is built because someone is divulging very personal information that you need to respect that. And someone is divulging that you're asking them to relive this horrible experience. So there needs to be a dignified way in which you approach the person, a dignified way in which you listen to their story. And you have mentioned a very important aspect that there needs to be an understanding of how storytelling is told in that culture. You know, for instance, I could give you an example. In the Somali culture, poetry is a big part of storytelling. Poetry makes a huge, people pay attention when there's a poem rather than when you have someone sitting there talking. And this is an area that we try to incorporate, incorporating the traditional ways of storytelling with the modern storytelling.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much for that. So this is an aspect, of course, that really need to be dug into. So we are going to be reflecting on it again because it's so important. Because apart from just this refugee situation, it's something that come up again and again in the Western culture in relation to non-Western people. In schools, for example, just to give you a very small, simple example. In our culture, in many cultures in Africa, I not say all of Africa, when an elderly person is talking to a younger person, you are not expected to look in the face of the person that is talking to you. That is seen as a disrespect. In Western culture, if you do that, that is if an elderly person is talking to you and you don't look into the face of the person, it is seen as a disrespect. You can see it's just an opposite. Therefore, we really need to understand this difference. They might be very simple, but it can lead to very high consequences. All right, we're going to leave that for another day. Now, I'm trying to look at the result of the Tell Your Story project, or the project that usually done in this sense. What would you say is the impact so far in that we are here trying to sensitize the people, use story, use different elements to reach the people? How much impact would you say it has made so far?
In terms of impact, I could say that we have been able to enhance participation in this area of awareness raising. We've been able to collaborate in various associations, local grassroots associations, international organizations, and therefore they have been able to incorporate the project work in terms awareness raising. We have seen local associations, and here I'm talking about grassroots where people have mobilized to carry out activities themselves. So a good example is in the refugee camps. We have had refugee outreach volunteers who are refugees themselves, but they act as our ambassadors, and they themselves engage with the community, have dialogues with the community continuously. So there is a sense of the impact here is the ownership of the project by the community. In Nigeria, we were successful in the schools themselves deciding to set up clubs that are aimed at addressing trafficking and smuggling. So that is an impact. And we have seen an increase of referrals, and this is in, like say, in Ethiopia and Sudan, where we are able to refer asylum seekers and refugees who are in need of protection services to the relevant units. So we have seen an increase in referrals as a success, and also able to identify refugees who are eligible for durable solutions such as family reunification. So one example is last year in around September, November, we identified roughly 50 refugees who were actually eligible. Therefore, they are able to reunify with their families around the world, in Europe and other countries, legally through family reunification. And they might not have been aware that they were eligible for this. We've increased visibility to opportunities. I had mentioned the scholarship opportunity. We are seeing an increase of interest in graduates wanting to apply for such opportunities, whereby before they would have felt despondent, would have felt opportunities are limited. Once they have their graduate degree, they're not able to pursue further education because they do not have the money for that. And then you never know, move onwards. But here is a possibility for them to not just pursue their education, but to be able to pursue it in another country through a legal channel. And in terms of impact, I could say that maybe this outputs is the number of people that we engage with online, our social media pages, and the project in general is seen as a trusted source of information and an influential source of information. There is a difference between trusted and influential. An organization can be trusted, but Obehi might be influential in transmitting that information. So our project is seen as both trusted and influential, since we do see us being approached by people online asking for our help or asking for support on where it is that we're getting more information in a certain country, or they're in a certain country. We've even gotten we get quite a number of people in Libya contacting us asking, this place I really need to be rescued, or I need assistance, who do have successfully been able to link these persons with the relevant UNHCR office, and they have assistance. So this is just a bit of a nutshell in terms of impact.
Thank you so much. That is really, it's really very important to also clarify, so at least people can see the different dimension of the project, of course. Now, I understand that you are working here because it's a work, but I also believe that, in fact, I used to say this one to so people that are working in the refugee center here in Italy, that even though this is a work, I know it, but it's also a humanitarian work. So it means that it's more than just a work, no? So I'm trying to see your take home in terms of the psychological or sort of the human benefit in this story. So what make you go home every day from work and feel happy that you have done this job, apart from the salary, of course?
Well, I think for me is this example that I gave you of the people that we have been able to direct to be provided assistance, people who are in danger. And we know at the end of the day that they're hopefully no longer in danger. And the people who we're able to create an impact in their lives in terms of in our very small way, because now here we're as a referral mechanism referring asylum seekers to to have their cases open for family reunification. These are the things that actually make me get up to go to work, because you know that even though it might be in a small way, but your work is impacting someone's life in a big way, in a way that it makes their lives better. Even though we might be part of a very small step in impacting their lives, but you're still part of a step in that. For me, that is what makes me get up every morning.
That's great. That's great. All right. Now we are towards the ending of the podcast, where we generally consider recommendations, solutions, and things like that. The first one I would like to ask you there is um, here we are trying to, okay, let's not say we are trying to discourage irregular migration, because I think I said that before and you already responded. Now, we're trying to discourage smuggling, where people are basically trafficked and treated as goods, sometimes by their fellow nationals. In the case of Nigeria, for example, the people that are trafficking Nigerians are fellow Nigerians who just think that they are doing business. As far as they're concerned, is business. So I just, anyway, that is very sad. Anyway, I don't even want to go there for now. But the question is, how do we discourage this human smuggling in a way that it's no longer a business for people to profit on the blood of other people?
I think it's there needs to be stringent laws against smuggling and trafficking of persons in these countries, in my view, because then when these laws are in place, then smugglers would be deterred by the sentences that they might get for being a human smuggler. And also, I think for the community is to ostracize smugglers. They should be called out by the community. Because in some communities, they do know who's a smuggler amongst them. It shouldn't be a position of why would someone be okay to walk in broad daylight, not ashamed to be a smuggler, not ashamed to be profiting from other people, not ashamed to be profiting from other people's lives. So as a community, as communities, there is a role in that. But then one thing is, it is difficult also to stamp out smuggling when there are no legal ways of movement, when people do not have opportunities for livelihood, when people do not have opportunities for education, when that opportunity seems to be elsewhere. It's difficult to stamp out smuggling of persons. So there is a responsibility to our states as well to create opportunities, make these opportunities available, because if they're not, people will want to seek them elsewhere. And they might not have the means to get there legally, then they will look for someone who will get them there somehow.
Yeah, yep. That is it. That is a plain fact. Yeah, it might be harsh, but that is a plain fact. I say it often too, that or you are going to give people the right way to do something, or they are going to do it anyway, even if it is the wrong way. So that will lead me to the question I want to ask you on the part of the solution, of course, which is, what is the right way to travel, to migrate, to, of course, I know that when you are talking of refugee, in this case, you are never prepared. You cannot prepare to become a refugee in that if a war break out in your country, you are never going to prepare. Say, for example, let me first of all learn Italian language so that when I get to Italy, I'll be able to speak to them. Hey, I am a refugee. It's not possible. You either run now or you die the next day. So let's put that in consideration, and let's look at also the entire immigration, because since you are not only limited to refugee, you are considering immigration in general. So I want to ask you the question, what is the right way to migrate?
That's a very difficult question, Obehi, because I don't think there is any right way to migrate. Of course, states would say the legal way to migrate is to move legally, exit a country and get in a country legally. According to states, that is the right way to migrate. But we know that it's not that black and white. There are so many factors that come into play such that I'd have to say there is no right way to migrate.
All right, that is fair enough. It is fair enough. So, of course, I know that the question was not going to be a very simple one, but anyway, it's fine. Thank you for your response to that. All right, now, there is no right or wrong way to migrate, okay? But of course, when people take advantage of other trafficking, then on their part, that must be wrong. That's obvious. I think we also agreed on that. And now, what can be done? I think I've asked you the question before. What can be done to minimize this, not the trafficking this time, but the human cost? Because whatever happened at the end of the day, the cost that we are seeing in the Mediterranean Sea, and because now it's about to be summer here, and most likely that the border is going to be, we're going to be hearing more news about it again, because it was cold until recently. And so the number have diminished a little bit. So we know that this is really painful to see people dying in the sea, to see the rebels in Libya torturing people, even to the point of selling them as slave in the 21st century. And of course, leaders, I don't know, we cannot pretend that we don't see what is happening. It appears that the people in Libya, these guys with guns, they come from another planet. They didn't come from another planet. They are being sponsored by people. Somebody is supplying them those weapons. Are they not human beings? How can you see human beings being sold into slavery these days? Are you people blind? So, I don't know. How can we minimize this human cost?
I mean, I think when it comes to the central Mediterranean, the EU states need to resume search and rescue services. We have seen a number of organizations that run this search and rescue facing accusations of smuggling. Their ships have been confiscated and so on. I think to minimize the human cost is we need to see more services, search and rescue services available on the Mediterranean, and the end of returning rescued persons to Libya, because Libya is not a safe country. People should not be returned to Libya when they have been rescued. That is what I could say that would minimize the human cost on the central Mediterranean.
Because Libya was a little bit safe before the Western government with their police decided to break up the country and install rebel. So there should be also European power, and the United States should also take responsibility for that. Anyway, we're not going to go that, we're not going to get deep into those arguments on this part, and that is okay. Of course, we are the people, we are the one pay the cost after they have destroyed the country. That is okay for them. Now, I'm looking at the diaspora group here. What do you see as a responsibility? What should the diaspora do? Because you were making mention of it before in one of your responses, that the storytelling, the way we tell our story, we should be mindful of it because it has some consequences in that people sort of think that those people that are telling false story on the line on social media, that is the reality, whereas it's not the reality. So it endangers people in that sense. So what should we do, we that are outside Africa, so that we don't contribute to this slot?
Well, I mean, the diaspora does have the responsibility in terms of the kind of information that is put out. There needs to be thought as to the impact of the information that you might provide. The diaspora also has access, or possibly has access, to a number of opportunities that would benefit their compatriots, whether this is scholarship opportunities, sponsorship opportunities, and so on. The diaspora should make these opportunities more visible to their compatriots, so that they don't have to resort to these sorts of movements, and also, I mean, the diaspora could participate in the development of their home countries, in the development of these livelihood activities. As the diaspora, of course, the African diaspora is huge on remittances, sending money back home. But if the diaspora would be able to mobilize to also channel their efforts and finances towards the betterment of marginalized and disadvantaged communities, perhaps that might have an impact.
Thank you very much, Christa. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time that you have spent here trying to clarify this issue that are by no means simple. They're not simple issues, but of course, we are going to have to treat it anyway. Yes, that question of the diaspora is absolutely very important, because we do have a very huge opportunity, even though we might not think so, though, because we are not properly organized in some of the cases. But we really do have a lot of power that we can leverage. Whether in terms of making a contribution to the type of leadership we have in Africa, the economic aspect of it, and the narration, the story. Because we are here in the West, we can sort of study other people that are using the same tools to manipulate the people in Africa. So why don't we use it also for our own good? So you're absolutely right. So we do have this power. All right, now we have come to the concluded part of it, which is where you leave your message. I don't know, whatever it can be your message, because now we have talked a lot about the diaspora, we're talking about the refugee, we are talking about the project, the Tell the Real Story project. A lot have really gone into this discussion this morning, this afternoon actually, because now it's 12:21. Now, how would you like to conclude it? Maybe a small message of yours, assuming that is the only part the people get, they can still get the message. So whatever it is that you want to share, please go ahead.
I mean, the only thing I'd share is, let us encourage each other to speak up. Let us speak up. It might save someone's life. It might help someone. Let us destigmatize the fact that being in Europe, not being able to talk about have endured. Let us destigmatize not being able to speak. So let us encourage each other to speak. Speaking could save someone's life.
Thank you very much for that, Christa. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Like Christa has said, let's be part of the narration, if not completely control it, because that is where it really happens. So whether in the diaspora or the people in Africa, or even the victims themselves who are here in different parts of Europe or in the West, as it were, let's control the narration. Let's add our voice to the narration. It is very important. All right. I want to thank all of you that have accompanied us to the end of this podcast. I thank Christa in a special way. It has been a pleasure sharing this moment with you. So I remain Obeyi Ewafo. Talk to you in the next podcast. Bye for now.